Yes. Couple things here for the questions, and not that this would be a make or break situation for it. You have the authors and the dates with each passage. That would not happen on an AP exam. It might say, here is an essay written, from the 1600s or the 1700s, but it certainly would not give you the specific writer. I think they do that to kind of protect you, so that should you come across a writer that you're not coming in with preconceived notions of, oh, this was written by J.D. Salinger. This is going to be the overall style. So some folks were asking about the Catcher in the Rye questions. How come it says the narrator every single time? Like it never would say Holden, because in none of the passages that you were reading did it ever say Holden. So it would have to go with the narrator. So with the idea that you don't know who the actual speaker is. Now Virginia knew who the narrator was because she was looking at the book, but it was meant to kind of mimic that. So I doubt that you would come across something from, say, like a Martin Luther King Jr., but they wouldn't want to go, this is from a speech or, a letter written by Martin Luther King Jr., and then Mina's background knowledge of him starts to influence her answers as opposed to strictly what is there in the text. So I think that's why they do it. The chances, honestly, of you reading something and going, Mr. King gave us that passage, I know this, is probably less than 0.1% kind of thing. So I don't anticipate it. Ethan, you weren't a fan, but it's John Donne. The John Donne. Ethan. That's what everyone else is saying too. Good news, you would not have this passage and the next one on the same AP exam. Not only have they already been on AP exams, but only one of the passages would predate 1900. So you would have one from the 1800s or earlier, you would not be getting two. So in some ways, not that saying this would be unfair, but this could be a little bit more of a challenge. At this point, I want to kind of get you experience with older passages so that you're not freaking out about them if you see something from the 15, 16, 17, 1800s. Shay, do you remember my first tip when it came to AP multiple choice? No. Some people think B. Read well.
Oh, yeah, that's usually better.
Read well and then choose the right answer. So we're going to read it. We're going to look at questions and kind of give you some ideas as to where we're going with this. I'll end up then also posting a video for the second one on Google Classroom as well. So if you have questions about the second passage, you can take a look at that one too. I observe the physician with the same diligence as he the disease. I see he fears, and I fear with him. I overtake him, I overrun him in his fear, and I go the faster because he makes his pace slow. I fear the more because he disguises his fear, and I see it with the more sharpness because he would not have me see it. He knows that his fear shall not disorder the practice and exercise of his art, but he knows that my fear may disorder the effect and working of his practice. At this point, I kind of hope that everyone writes a word next to the paragraph. Fear. What are we looking at? We're certainly looking at fear. And I'm going to let you know right now, my iPad writing is terrible. Because I've gone through like 85 styluses and none of them work for me. So whatever. That doesn't work for me either. I'm saving you that one. As the ill affections of the spleen complicate and mingle themselves with every infirmity of the body, so doth fear insinuate itself in every action or passion of the mind. And as the wind of the body will counterfeit any disease, and seem the stone, and seem the gout, so will fear counterfeit any disease of the mind. What do we know about fear? Based from the passage. So doth fear insinuate itself in every action or passion of the mind.
It spreads.
Spreads? And basically, where does it spread to? I think a simple word that would encompass the mind and the body is going to be, it ends up being everywhere. Okay, so fear spreads. So where is fear? Fear is going to be everywhere. All right? Note what word starts getting used a good bit as well, so far as fear. What does it do to the mind, to the body? So doth fear will counterfeit any disease of the mind. Will counterfeit any disease and seem the stone. So you have this little repetition that's now starting to take place with the use of counterfeit. It shall seem love, a love of having, and it is but a fear, a jealous and suspicious fear of losing. It shall seem valor in despising and undervaluing danger, and it is but fear and an overvaluing of opinion and estimation, and a fear of losing that. A man that is not afraid of a lion is afraid of a cat, not afraid of starving, and yet is afraid of some joint of meat at the table presented to feed him, not afraid of the sounds of drums and trumpets and shot, and those which they seek to drown, the last cries of men, and is afraid of some particular harmonious instrument, so much afraid as that with any of these the enemy might drive this man, otherwise valiant enough, out of the field. One thing that you're going to notice when it comes to reading a lot of these passages, a man is not afraid, and then you have not afraid of starving, and then not afraid of the sound of the drum. Syntactically, what do you start having going on here? We got a repetition. You could say parallelism, parallel structure, parallel syntax, but you'll notice in a lot of passages you tend to get that parallelism that will take place. Shay, it's easier to draw parallel lines than to write parallelism. Me too. A little cross-curricular again. I know not what fear is, nor I know what it is that I fear now. I fear not the hastening of my death, and yet I do fear the increase of the disease. I should belie nature if I should deny that I feared this. And if I should say that I fear death, I should belie God. What's he mean by this? What's the little conundrum now that's starting to take place for him? And we got a new element here that's being brought up.
It's kind of like this battle within him of like, if he thinks he shouldn't be afraid, then that's not being honest with himself about his nature. But if he is afraid, then that's denying like his belief in God, because God has enough control.
So and you have this. So you have this like Christianity element that kind of starts to bring in. Is he afraid to die to some extent? A little bit. Like, it's not that this is his greatest fear. But I think for a lot of folks, should that moment start to get a little bit closer, there's probably a natural fear that takes place. But if he fears that, for him spiritually, there's going to be a little bit of an issue because, well, I'm supposed to go to heaven. It's going to be a good place. So if I fear dying, then that means I fear being with God. And that's going to kind of start a little bit of some Christian confusion for him at this point. So there's almost like this paradox that is kind of starting to take place. My weakness is from nature, who hath but her measure. My strength is from God, who possesses and distributes infinitely. As then, every cold air is not a damp, every shivering is not a stupefaction. So every fear is not a fearfulness. Every declination is not running away. Every debating is not a resolving, every wish that it were not thus is not a murmuring, nor dejection, though it be thus. But as my physician's fear puts not him from his practice, neither doth mine put me from receiving from God and man and myself spiritual and civil and moral assistances and consolations. Jeez. It is a long sentence. So this would here, and the fact that you're just saying that is good because you're going, okay, there's some syntactic complexity that is happening with it. So being aware of little things that you notice is good. So if you simply just have to write next to it, LS, long sentence, there's something going on here. It's making you aware. You said about the supine inattention passage, and you had a question about supine, but if you come across a word that you're unfamiliar with, you circle it because you're just looking for what are things that jump out to me while I'm going about reading. The more that you are going to write on the passage, to annotate it, to circle, to interact with it, chances are the better chance of some of it sticking with you. And yeah, this one's a difficult one to read. It's not like, clearly it should make perfect sense to you, but you're engaging with it. And that's the main thing that we're looking for. So number one, passage contains all of the following rhetorical devices, and then there's our favorite word right there, except. So we're going for which one is not here. How confident do you think Morgan is in her answer? Did you see what Grace did? She just did the look and put her hand on her chin like, yeah, tell us, what do you think, Morgan?
Well, you said paradox, and then there's also contrast. So I would say deep.
You don't want to say the word apostrophic? Your friendship's good with this one?
Yeah, we agree.
Anyone remember what apostrophic speech is? It's at least not present. So, you're working on your essay for brainstorming and go, Mr. King, this sucks. That would be apostrophic speech, even though I'm not 6 feet under. So Holden talking to Allie would be apostrophic speech within the book, and because, simply not present. So yeah, the answer is D. Good job. And Morgan started to kind of do a little bit of a rundown of, okay, you said this, and you chose D on your Scantron too, right? Good job. And the way you went about explaining it, perfectly fine. Do you see any other reasons why it would be D, looking at the answer choices? And not meaning, well, here's my example of contrast, or here's my example of paradox, but just simply kind of looking at them.
Because paradox and contrast are practically the same thing, and so is repetition and parallel syntax.
So B and E similar, A and C similar, so in some ways they kind of end up crossing themselves out. Yeah. What's a paradox? It's a contrasting statement that reveals a truth. And at the very least, the hope is that would make you go, okay, I really want to take a look at apostrophic speech. You still want to back it up to make sure and look in the passage he's not talking to anyone who's not present at any time. But that at least is kind of giving you a cue in as to, I'm pretty sure it's not A, B, C. I'm pretty sure it's not E. Let me just simply double check. But sometimes you will get questions that do things like that. We're not taking a look at the passage, but there was question, I think it was like 21 or 22. It was 23 on the second passage. Which of the following is a restatement of the phrase singular defect of light from line 28? If it's a restatement, what does that mean? You're rewording it or you're stating it again. And if it's in line 28 and it's a restatement, when does that restatement have to occur? After the original term. So those first two options for lines 24 and 25 would get nixed because it can't be a restatement if it is preceding it. So the questions do tend to be difficult. And you're never going to hear me go, easy question, everyone should get this right. But they will put some cues in there for you, some clues that can kind of lead you in the right direction from time to time. And there are some questions that we kind of hope you get right, because it would be on the easier level. Trust your gut, trust your instinct when it kind of comes to that first thing. Number two, traditionally, is a tricky question. It can be inferred from the speaker, it can be inferred from the passage that the speaker would agree with which of the following statements about fear. Freedom from fear is fully realizable only in the afterlife. Harboring fear is the greatest offense a believer can commit. Fear arises in people who have more weaknesses than most. Fear is as simple to understand as any physical malady. Ignoring fear, is the sanest way of confronting it. What do you think? What would the superheroes do, Libby?
I don't know.
They wouldn't ignore it. Virginia, what do you think?
I said D.
You said D?
Yes.
Okay.
I kind of did that as a process of elimination. I was trying to figure out where this 19th thing would work, and I said I didn't think it was C or A. So it just seemed like the thing that he talked about the most was how it was similar.
To an illness. Okay. All right. Makes sense. What was Libby thinking?
Well, I said B.
But I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Don't judge me. Emma had a hand up.
I said B.
She also said B. See, you feel good now. Because it always feels good to have someone else.
Yeah.
You going to support Virginia?
Well, I originally did put D, but now that I'm looking at Libby's answer, I kind of agree with Libby. I think it is B. But it could be D, so we'll see.
It's not B.
It's not
Oh.
B. Is it C?
It's not D.
It's C.
What?
It's
No!
C. It's C.
Don't say A. I'm
It's C.
missing.
Please tell me it's C.
No, it's not even C.
No.
What? This is rigged. John Donne is
This is why superheroes don't take.
Grace, what are you thinking? She said, I'm thinking I'm right.
Yes, Grace.
I don't know why. I crossed out B and then I thought it was the best answer.
Okay. It can be inferred that it can be inferred, so it can be guessed that the speaker would agree with which of the following. Harboring fear is the greatest offense a believer can commit. I have an issue with it being saying it's the greatest offense. I think he would agree that it is something that people would do, but it's also natural. Nature gives this to me, but it's my belief in God that lets me know, my weakness is from nature, who hath but her measure, my strength is from God. These two things are going to be in conflict, so it is going to happen. The reason for 2, and it doesn't give you line numbers, but this stuff does tend to kind of go in chronological order, so I would take a look at the beginning part of the passage. What is the key word that I wrote right here? Where's fear? How do you get away from it? You're dead. So, and again, it's not going which of these does he state, but which of these would he most likely agree with? Well, if it is everywhere, if it insinuates itself in every action and every action of the mind and everything that the body is doing, probably the only way you're going to get away from it is going to be in the afterlife. When you are, and then this is where his Christian viewpoints could certainly come in, when I'm with God and fear is now subsiding because I'm now in the happy place with him. It's a tricky question. Number 3 in the passage, and not to make anyone feel bad, this is one that I would hope we would get. In the passage's second sentence, the speaker uses language that might best describe a fistfight, political upheaval, rugby match, courtroom interrogation, or foot race. Pressure's on because I said you better get it right. Ethan?
I said B.
You said B, political upheaval? It's not political upheaval. That's all right. What's 6 minus 5?
1, square root of 1.
Okay, good job.
I was thinking it was
E, foot race. What words are sending you that way? And you're right.
Well, it says like, I overtake him, I overrun him in his fear, I go faster because he's going slow.
Okay, so yeah, you have the pace, faster, overrun him, overtake him. So that would be a foot race. Years ago, Johnny, someone said after we went the answer, she went, "Oh, I didn't know what a foot race was." And then Shannon never talked in class again. No, it wasn't her. A lot of area questions kind of coming from this place. It shall seem valor in despising and undervaluing danger, and it is but fear in an overvaluing of opinion and estimation, and a fear of losing that. What are you afraid of losing?
People's opinion of you.
And probably people's, what kind of opinion of you? The good opinion, the positive opinion. You're not afraid of losing the fact that Shay does not like you, but you're afraid of like losing her respect, her honor. I do know who it was, but she's probably like 30 by now. It is most likely that the physician makes his pace slow, playing off of question number 3, in order to study the reaction, admit that the illness is chronic, remind himself that a careless examination could prove fatal, trick his patient, hide his concern. Why make his pace slow?
I said E because the narrator's talking about how it's like he's trying to not make the narrator panic, because if the narrator has fear, then it'll like affect his getting well again.
So you're even answering number 5 with this.
Oh, yeah, I guess.
Because if we were to go, the speaker's physician is concerned about the patient's fear, you didn't like say the words exactly, but I'm guessing for 5, you went with not A, not C, not D, not E, but B, where these two are kind of playing off one another. So they're both scared. The reason for number 4 that there could be some fear, not exactly sure what's going on here. But I can't let the patient know that he's fearful, because if he's fearful, then the efficacy or the effectiveness of my treatment is not going to work. So E and B end up being those two answers for numbers 4 and 5. Absolutely. So you have this physician thing introducing the concept of fear, almost kind of like as an analogy, a comparison, like a little anecdote that's taking place. And then afterwards in that second paragraph is now when we start taking a look at, okay, what do we got here with fear? The comparisons in lines 11 to 7 of fear with the spleen and wind of the body suggest that fear is all of the following, and then you get that good old except question kind of coming up again. Johnny, you didn't write your answers down. Nope. Said on the board, write your answers down. And he just didn't do it.
Sorry.
You remember what you put? Nope. No. Sneak at Alex's paper and see what she put. Ooh, Shay's looking.
I crossed them out.
What'd you cross out?
I crossed out A, C, and D.
So you crossed out A, C, and D?
Yeah.
Okay. So I left you with persuasive and dynamic. Anyone know what D means? You got all excited and then the hand went down.
It kind of reminded me of a word. Sometimes you just gotta do that. Like,
Okay.
that reminds me
Mhm.
of another word, which I don't think is. Isn't congenial a word? Is that not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So I was thinking, I think that means happy. So I was like, you know, doesn't make sense.
What made you think of a birth defect? Okay.
So does that mean it's like hereditary?
Yes.
Okay.
So as opposed to Sandra Bullock in Miss Congeniality,
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Yes.
which is fine because you're. What am I looking for? I'm looking for you to think. So good job. But this one, yeah, it's a little bit different in the sense that it is. Ooh, it almost like looks like letters. Oops, till there. What happened?
You jinxed it.
Yep. Now it just looks like my daughter's handwriting. Hereditary. Yeah. Take a look at these in comparison to question number 2, the one that was apostrophic speech. Deceptive, persuasive, injurious, dynamic. You can't chuckle. You didn't write anything down. You didn't offer us an answer. Why are you chuckling?
Well, it's. Wait, what?
That was our thoughts, Johnny. If it's deceptive, it's probably also persuasive. And I could probably even put some others on there. You thinking of anything else? No? It's going to be manipulative, and if you're trying to manipulate, you are essentially trying to, be persuasive. You're trying to get something. It injures. It can hurt you. If you are able to be persuasive and deceptive, you're not a one-trick pony. You are dynamic. So they end up playing off of each other, where what is the one thing that's not here? It's not hereditary, it's not passed down, it's simply something that all humans have with it. But it is deceptive, it is persuasive, it is injurious, it can do these things to you, it is certainly dynamic. The word that keeps coming back is it counterfeits. So if it counterfeits, it can be persuasive, it can be deceptive, it can be dynamic, and it can hurt. It's okay that you were thinking of miscongeniality, because again, you're like thinking of something that you can tie it in with. And yeah, we think of more congenial than we would of like a congenital, birth defect or something like that. In 19 to 22, the speaker suggests that unauthentic valor is motivated by. So 19 to 22, we got a lot of those kinds of things. So what do we end up kind of having here for 19 to 22? What would hide it? What would best match up with the idea? Fear of losing a positive outlook, a positive belief about a person? Self-conscious insecurity was C. Absolutely. Coming over here then to number 8. Sentence beginning, a man that is not afraid of a lion supports the speaker's proposition that fear is not afraid of a lion, but how's it does it end? You're afraid of a cat. Meow. Rawr. Hello.
I was gonna say it's unpredictable, not bound by logic.
It's not bound by logic. And notice, again, not to go back to like question number 2 all the time, what's one of the things that are certainly present within the passage? There is paradox. It doesn't make sense that you would not be afraid of a lion, but little, Muffin or Snowpaw or whatever kitty name you have comes walking by, you're going to be terrified of that one. Number 9, people do not like this question. One could at least partially rebuke the implication of lines 22 to 30 by noting that a man who is afraid of some joint of meat at the table might And here's the words that folks don't like: partially and might. So again, there's not like a direct answer that's showing up in the passage, but which of these would make the most sense? Why would you be afraid of some joint of meat at the table? Habitually decline offers of drink as well, lack an interest in food, prefer to dine in solitude, justifiably suspect his host's intentions, or believe that taking food corrupts the spirit. Not afraid of starving, and is yet afraid of some joint of meat at the table presented to feed him.
I think it's definitely not B, C, or E.
Okay, well, okay, so you're going not B, not C, not E. So you're between A and D.
Yep.
Were you thinking A or D?
I said B because everything seems so extreme.
He said he was not afraid of starving. Plus, I mean, what human being doesn't like food? Like, come on. How is he gonna be alive?
Tell this to me yesterday and maybe I would have changed my answer.
That's what I was like. I was like,
sitting
he
here going,
cannot
I'm
like food.
Not afraid of starving, and yet is afraid of some joint of meat at the table.
I think it's D, because
Going D?
Yes.
I'm so confused by this wording. Like, I don't know what it's asking.
You don't want
I
to
think-
eat meat.
So, like, you might be suspicious.
Maybe your host tried to poison you.
It is D.
Okay.
You're not afraid of starving, and so there's nothing like, well, you would turn drink away as well. Lack of interest in food. You know, if you still want food, you know, if you're starving, prefer to dine. You know what? I think I'd rather starve. I'm just going to take my food and go over. Believe that taking food corrupts the spirit. The one that would be the most, and I hate using the word logical because the wording is, and this isn't bound by logic, would be, well, maybe there's some reason that I wouldn't trust what Cuz's going to give to me or Mr. Kane's going to end up giving to me. Virginia, did you have?
I was just going to say that, like, A, B, and C don't really have anything to fear, though. Like, you have it to define something. You used to have any interest or something. Like, there's not right in that there's
True.
no fear.
And so if you suspect the host's intention, there is that aspect of fear that is there. I think that's a good explanation.
I'm so confused about what the question is asking.
So one could at least so I don't mean just to simply reword it. One could at least partially rebuke or argue the implication of lines 22 to 30 by noting that a man who's afraid of some joint of meat at the table might. So why would a person potentially be afraid of food even though that person's not afraid of starving? Well, you could be afraid of the food if you justifiably suspect that the host is trying to poison you.
So is the answer the rebuttal?
It would be a partial rebuttal as to why, like as to why would it make sense that they could be fearful of that food.
Okay.
And I hate using this as an answer or as an excuse. There's ultimately questions that we're going to miss. And so this is one where I don't like put too much on it, like because I'd say it's a level 5 question, 1 being easy, 5 being the most difficult. I'd say this one's here in a level 5. And I don't want to, as end of conversation, let's move on to the next one. But it's one where if you realize that you miss it, I wouldn't beat myself up too much over it. Real quick, because the period's going to come to a close. 11 is B, and, for replacing nor, and 12 is E. Concatenants mean they usually go together.